We have been discussing from the beginning of this week issues affecting the Nigeria commodities market, and we've also discussed ways we can solve these issues. But we want to go further and discuss the opportunities that abound. Recently, about not so long ago, there was a survey that was given that the average Nigerian lives below $1. And right now, coupled with the high cost of living, I'm quite sure a lot of people can't afford some basic needs or necessities. So, sir, would you please shed more light on this issue coupled with that and ways by which we could also really solve these issues and tackle them for real, because it's been going on for quite a while now.
All right. To put it in perspective, the issues with cost of living has to do with the expenses that the average consumer spend on food, housing, and some other basic things that you need to live a quality life to some extent. But then generally with the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics data that was released recently, the cost of living has gone astronomically upward. To that extent, it has become a major challenge. The rate of inflation as of December 2023 was put at about 28.9%, and that of the food inflation higher than that. So it's become a major challenge for the average citizen to be able to even live up to that $1. If you convert it, it becomes challenging to have a decent living.
Okay, sir, what policies can the government introduce, for instance, partnering with more multinational and private institutions to be able to uplift the common man on the street and ensure that he has a more adequate standard of living as opposed to living below $1 every day?
Yeah, I think the issue is, one, we need to reduce the dependence on foreign goods. Two, we need to find a way to support the agricultural value chain so that food security can be sustained in the country. So the government, on the one hand, need to find a way. This emergency relief posture of the government may not really solve the problem. So those who took loan from the Central Bank of Nigeria to do farming, and we don't have those food items coming into the market, becomes a major problem. Furthermore, I think there's a need to increase access to market, and that is important because some of the food item produced can't even find their way into the marketplace. So it's a whole lot of challenge, and that the government and the private sector need to look inward. What is important is that the government must find a way to provide an environment that can make people to do business. To the double-digit loan that people take to farm is very high. That will affect a greater majority of people that are into farming. Two, the private sector must find a way as well to support the government in providing necessary input, particularly to farmers, so that we can have what you call food security. But the government current approach to resolving the issues of try to do emergency by releasing grains from the reserve, I don't think that's the best way to resolve the issues. So we look at it from the support to the farmers, find a way to drop the rate of inflation. That will help. Then improve on the access to markets so that the commodities can come to the major cities. Then find a way, in addition to that, to see how we can use commodity boards to take some of those products from the farmers. So to that extent, we can help to reduce the negative impact on the cost of living on the average citizen.
Okay, thank you for that. But there was something you mentioned while you were talking. You said we needed to reduce our over-dependence on foreign goods. We know that in this country we have a lot of foreign goods that we import, that we use on a daily basis. But we also know that to improve on our agro-produce exports, we also need to stop depending on these foreign goods. But how do we cope as a country when we actually have some very important foreign items that we need on a daily basis to survive? And we would imagine if, for example, we cut off our supply of imported rice. I mean, it's not too many Nigerians like the locally grown grains in the country. That's rice, for example, and it won't really sit well with us. So how do we just suddenly reduce our dependence on foreign goods?
No, as a people, we must resolve that for us to improve on our standard of living, not cost of living,
yes,
we must finally find a way to look inward by consuming the goods that we produce. That will enhance productivity, and the price of some of those commodities that is affecting the cost of living will be reduced to some extent. So the point that I'm trying to make here, or I'm canvassing, is that beyond the government trying to find a way to provide some level of a single-digit loan to farmers and even to industry will help, but our own peculiarity, why we should consume our own goods and services, will equally help to reduce the cost of living, particularly on food.
Okay, yes. But going further, would you also agree with, yesterday my guest, I discussed with him the Central Bank of Nigeria's governor's speech when he was called in front of the House of Representatives, and how he said that it is possible to bring down inflation to 21.4%. Yes, we know the federal government is putting measures in place to be able to curb this, but being very realistic currently, do you think it's something that can happen maybe in a few weeks' time? Because this high cost of food all over the country is causing protests. There were protests in Minna, in Niger State, and also in Kano. So do you think this is going to be feasible within a short period?
The federal government has already set up a committee to look at that. So as a committee, including the Minister for Finance, let's see what they can quickly put on the table. But essentially, even 21 point something percent inflation, I think to me is unacceptable for us to do good business in Nigeria. So the government should find a way to drive the inflation less than that. We had in this country maybe barely about 10 years ago where we have about 9.8%.
That's wonderful. The standard of living must have been very
good.
No,
inflation rate.
Inflation rate,
yes, so
yes, it wasn't.
The cost of living was not as high as this.
Not as high as
the dollar to the naira was relatively okay. So the government should find a way to drive down the rate of inflation, particularly food inflation, which is even higher than the average inflation. If you look at the consumer price index, is particularly worrisome that people cannot even afford some basic items. Take, for example, this time last year, a crate of egg was sold for about 1,200. But as we speak, a crate of egg, just 30 pieces, is selling in some places 3,200, 3,400, in supermarket 4,000.
Yes, so I was going to mention that.
Cannot even sustain an average family for a month. When we talk about rice, a bag of rice is about 40-something thousand.
It's more than
so
that.
These are just basic food item. So is really worrisome, and that the government has to. But I'm of the view that this emergency response by bringing grains from the reserve will not resolve the problem. Even at 21 point something percent, that is not good enough to sustain. So beyond the government aspect of it, generally we need to adjust what you call the cost of living adjustment, called COLA, C-O-L-A, COLA. We need to do that in line with the current inflationary trend, so that then the minimum wage issue needs to equally to be addressed by the private sector employer and the government. Maybe to some extent, once an adjustment is made on the cost of living, those adjustments will help to cushion the effect of the negative impact on the consumer pricing index. So if the government is able to have his hand towards some of these incentives that we just spoke about earlier, maybe there will be improvement. But it's equally essential that citizens must find a way to look inward so that they consume what we produce. And you were mentioning to me that off air that even the average price I talked about in terms of rice is even far higher than that. So it depends on where you are buying from, which market. So if you live in an upscale area, I think the price should be more than the average price. So what I used was an average price so that we cannot have a blanket price for everybody.
Okay. I agree with what you're saying. Like if we are living in maybe places like Lagos on the island, and also in more expensive cities like Abuja, you know, the prices of food items in Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt will be very high, as opposed to maybe if you were living in the middle belt states or in other western parts of Nigeria, it won't be so expensive. So going further, I would also like to ask, what kind of infrastructure developments do you think can also aid Nigerians to reduce the high cost of living, the high cost of food? Because recently we've been talking about how we need to have things like improved roads, good electricity, stable electricity to help us in this country. We also needed cheaper housing rates, as right now things like that are so expensive for the average Nigerian. So how can the government also help us to put up better infrastructure to aid this lower cost of living in the country?
I think for me, the government should invest more in the rural areas to reduce rural-urban migration. That's one of the major challenges. The road networks must be improved upon, particularly rural infrastructure, so that what you call access to the market become very easy, because some of the commodities and food items that we talk about can't even find their way into the urban area. So that to a large extent affects the price of food items. So that's on the government side. So that's important. Then for research institutes, they should improve in terms of the yield that we can get from some of these agricultural products, so that that again may likely drive down the cost of living. So a holistic approach is required to address the high cost of living that we currently experience in Nigeria. So
our ministers, our governors, both at the federal and state level, need to all come together to actually put better infrastructure for its citizens all over the country, north, south, east, and west.
Yes, the point is that, in my view, the governors are actually paying lip service to the cost of living in Nigeria. They quickly run to the federal government, and they are trying to have an emergency response. And we are not in a humanitarian crisis situation. But then, what can we do differently as a people and as a government to improve on the lifestyle, even the way we do business? So if we're able to address this critical sector or these critical issues, then the cost of living might just go down. But if we do things the same way we've been doing them, then this challenge will be with us for a very long time.
So how do we capitalize on Nigeria's rich resources to create economic opportunities that can alleviate the high cost of living. I'll start with Mr. Sam.
I think the guest just spoke to
Yes, to that.
access to credit, which is very important. So once you have access to credit, that will improve. So more investment in terms of the opportunities that you can provide within the agricultural value chain. So once there are more investment, then you can drive the cost of living drastically down based on those massive investment. And as mentioned earlier, in addition to access to credit, beyond the access, the lending rate, when you won't have access to credit, must be single digits, so that can increase the volume of investment in that sector.